All right, welcome back, geographers. Today we're going to dive deeper into the weathering process and the fundamental ways that rocks break down at Earth's surface. So, weathering is the first step in the denudation process that we discussed in our prior section. Now, while internal forces are building mountains and continents, weathering begins the work of breaking them down, setting the stage for what we call mass wasting and erosion. So let's explore this further. Excellent. Okay, so weathering requires agents, the forces that actually do the work of breaking down rock. So most weathering agents are atmospheric in nature. The three most influential atmospheric components are oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water vapor. Okay, so the oxygen drives oxidization reactions. Then carbon dioxide forms carbonic acid in water. The third is water vapor, which participates in numerous chemical reactions. Now, temperature changes represent the second most important weathering agent, especially in regions with a freeze-thaw cycle, okay, where temperatures drop below freezing and then it thaws out. And this freeze-thaw cycle can be a daily or an annual cycle, okay? We also have biotic agents that play a significant role in weathering, and these include things like burrowing activities of animals or like worms, ants, and rodents. Also, the rooting effect of plants that can penetrate and widen cracks. And perhaps the most importantly are living organisms that produce chemical substances that attack rocks. And we're going to talk about each of these. But for example, in Sequoia National Park, you can observe massive tree roots lifting and separating granite blocks. Okay. In urban environments, I'm sure you have at some time noticed sidewalks being uplifted by tree roots. The same process happens in natural settings, but over much larger timescales. So it's important to understand that the weathering processes rarely work in isolation. The three principal categories of weathering, mechanical, chemical, and biological, they usually act together to break down rocks. Now, mechanical weathering is the physical breakdown of rock material without any change in chemical composition. So think of it as breaking a rock into two smaller pieces without changing what the rock is made of. Now, the freeze thaw action of water is probably the most important single agent of mechanical weathering, especially in cold climates. Now, this process called frost wedging or frost shattering occurs when water seeps into rocks cracks. It then freezes and expands by about 9%. And this expansion exerts tremendous pressure up to 2,000 kilograms per square centimeter. And this pressure is sufficient enough to split even the hardest rock. Now, the effects of frost wedging vary depending on the size of the rock openings. In large openings, it produces boulders. In small openings, it can make little granulate rocks and make little grains out of the rocks into sand and dust through a process called granular disintegration. Now, if you imagine though, if we have a rock and the water seeps in and freezes and pushes it open, that opening might be open slightly one year, and then the following freeze, it opens a little more, and the following thaw and freeze, it keeps opening more and more. So this process might not happen on the first freeze, but after accumulation of multiple freezes. Now, The Rocky Mountains are a great example. It has talus slopes, and these are large accumulations of angular rock fragments that are then at the base of the cliffs. And this is direct evidence of frost wedging. So, salt wedging is another form of the mechanical process. And this is where salt crystals form from evaporating water and exert pressure similar to the ice would. Now, salt wedging occurs closer to the ocean areas. So, if you've ever been to the ocean and you get that salty air and the breeze coming off, there's actual salt. That's why we call it the salty air. There's salt in the air. So salt wedging is less significant than frost wedging as we move inland. The salt wedging is very effective along coastlines where rocks are repeatedly exposed to salt-laden spray. So the honeycombed appearance of the coastal cliffs off of in northern Oregon is often the result of salt weathering, okay? And it has the same action as the frost wedging. Temperature changes, even without freezing, can cause mechanical weathering through expansion and contraction of mineral grains. And this is particularly effective in desert regions where the daily temperatures can fluctuate and exceed 40 degrees Celsius. So in areas like Death Valley, where it can get extremely cold and extremely hot. Okay, next we have exfoliation. So one of the most visually striking forms of mechanical weathering is called exfoliation. It's a process in which curved layers will peel off of bedrock in sheets, very similar to the layers of an onion separating. Now, this process commonly occurs in granite and related intrusive rocks, so rocks that have formed under the surface. The dynamics of exfoliation are not completely understood. However, there's several mechanisms that likely contribute. The first one is temperature fluctuations. They may play a role, though exfoliation also occurs where there are no major temperature fluctuations. The next one is hydration, causing volume changes in minerals, and they may put strain on the rocks and weaken the rocks, okay? The third that may contribute is, and it's widely accepted, is that the rock cracks as the overlaying weight has been removed, allowing the expansion and inducing cracking of that granite. So think of the overlying weight of the last glaciation in the process of isostasy. Okay, so as those glaciers retreated and melted, the land was able to somewhat rebound without the overlying weight and then expand slightly, and exfoliation then started to occur in that onion-like layer. Yosemite National Park provides probably the best example of exfoliation in Half Dome. We do have other examples like Stone Mountain in Georgia and Enchanted Rock in Texas. So these massive dome-shaped formations result from the continuous peeling of rock layers over millions of years. So chemical weathering involves the decomposition of rocks through alteration of their minerals. Unlike mechanical weathering, chemical weathering actually changes the composition of the rock. So almost all minerals are susceptible to chemical change when exposed to atmospheric and biotic agents. though some, like quartz, are more resistant than others. This is why quartz sand is so common. It's often what remains after minerals have weathered away. Moisture is required for all chemical weathering processes, which is why chemical weathering is more intensive in humid regions. The principal reacting agents are oxygen, water, and carbon dioxide. The most significant chemical weathering process include number one, oxidation. The chemical union of oxygen with metals in rock minerals. Now, the rusting of iron is a very familiar example. When iron-bearing minerals react with oxygen, they produce iron oxide, which is usually more voluminous, so larger, it's more soft, and it's more easily eroded than its original compounds. The reddish color of many solids and rock formations, like those in the Southwest, result from oxidation of iron minerals. So this is a example at Capitol Reef National. The top picture is Capitol Reef National Park, but then also the bottom picture is a recent trip that I took to the Valley of Fire, which is not far from Las Vegas. If you're ever in Las Vegas and have a spare day, it's a great day trip. So the next is the third component is hydration. The chemical union of water with another substance to produce a new compound. Hydration nearly always creates a softer and weaker product than the original mineral. It also increases the mineral's volume, contributing to mechanical disintegration through a process called hydrolysis. For example, when feldspar in granite undergoes hydrolysis, it transforms into clay minerals, weakening the rock structure. So next is carbonation. And this occurs when carbon dioxide dissolved in water forms carbonic acid, which reacts with carbonate rocks like limestone. This reaction produces calcium bicarbonate, which is highly soluble and can be readily removed by runoff or percolation. Carbonation is responsible for the formation of cave systems like Mammoth Cave in Kentucky and the Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico. Now, what's a fascinating result of chemical weathering is spheroidal weathering, where exposed angular boulders gradually weather into rounded shapes as chemical processes remove thin rock layers from corners and edges. And you can observe this in many boulder fields where what once were angular blocks have been transformed into smooth spherical shapes. Here are the blocks, and a great example of this are the boulders in Joshua Tree National Park. Okay. All right, biological weathering. The third type of weathering is biological, and this refers to the weathering process involving living organisms. So, while sometimes this is overlooked, biological agents can be remarkably effective in breaking down rock. The most notable biological weathering occurs through plant roots penetrating into cracks and crevices looking for that soil or water. And the plant roots exert pressure, this physical pressure, as they grow. We also have lichens, as pictured here on the slide. Lichens produce acids that leach minerals and then weaken the rocks. And this is a very effective biological weathering agent. The next is burrowing animals that mix soil effectively and sometimes contribute to rock disintegration. So burrowing animals, even like ants, tiny biotic animals, tiny microscopic animals, those all are included in biological weathering. So, for example, if you look closely at rock surfaces in forested areas, you will often find lichens creating small little depressions as they slowly dissolve minerals from that rock surface. Similarly, in grasslands, prairie dogs or ground squirrels, when they burrow, they can accelerate weathering by bringing fresh rock material to the surface where it is exposed to atmospheric agents. Excuse me. It is worth noting that subsequent chemical weathering often obscures the initial effects of biological weathering, making it difficult to quantify its overall importance. So, how much has biological weathering played into the weathering of the rocks versus mechanical or chemical weathering? Okay, differential weathering and climate. So, weathering doesn't affect all rocks equally. Some rock types are relatively weak and easily weathered, where others are strong and more resistant. This differential weathering creates many of our most dramatic landscapes. For example, Monument Valley in Arizona has erosion resistant sandstone caps that have protected the underlining softer shales, creating this iconic butte and mesas. Similarly, the hoodoos of Bryce Canyon have formed because the harder rock layers have protected columns of softer rock beneath it. The local environment plays a crucial role in determining which rocks are weathered most rapidly. A rock might be relatively resistant in an arid or dry environment and may be quite vulnerable in a humid one. For example, limestone is fairly durable in desert regions, but weathers rapidly in rainy areas due to carbonation. Also, climate strongly influences weathering intensity. Chemical weathering, in particular, is enhanced by a combination of high temperatures and abundant precipitation. Where do we have that? In our southern regions. While both factors matter, precipitation is usually more important. This explains why our tropical regions experience the most intensive chemical weathering on Earth, while mechanical weathering dominates in our cold or more arid regions. So, as we've seen, weathering is a complex interplay of mechanical, chemical, and biological processes that work together to break down even the hardest rocks over time. These processes are the first step in the larger cycle of denudation that shapes our landscape. In our next lecture, I'm going to explore how weathered material moves downslope through mass wasting processes. So until then, I encourage you to observe weathering in action in your local environment, whether it's frost-cracked sidewalks, rounded boulders, or the slow work of lichens on stone surfaces. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in our next segment.